just in case Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren tries to get me fired. My comments do not reflect the views of Kennesaw State University, the Friedman Foundation, or the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, or the Gold Scholarship, who I used to work for. Right? These are my remarks alone, so now I can keep my jobs. All right. You know, Arthur Brooks, who I was very blessed to know for 4 years when we got hired at Georgia State years ago, said, you know, what are you thankful for? I'm thankful I got to know him, and I'm thankful I got to know a lot of you. And I'm thankful for the folks who just spoke for what they're doing. Why should we allow them to exist? Why should we allow interesting, different kind of schools, you know, private schools, hybrid schools, virtual schools, charter schools? Why should they be able to exist? And I'm going to answer that by answering these 4 questions. Number 1, do Georgians support giving parents more options, more choice over where to send their children to school? Second, is school choice good for students? Third, does school choice harm state and local budgets? And fourth, are there opportunities for greater school choice in Georgia? All right, first, in May 2014, when I was at Georgia College, I commissioned a poll of 1,000 adults. So the poll skews left. It wasn't registered voters, it wasn't likely voters, it was adults. 1,000 Georgia adults. And I asked them a bunch of questions, and the specific questions will be posted online at Georgia Public Policy. So I asked them, do you support Georgia's tax credit scholarship program? That's where you can redirect, you know, if you're a married couple, up to $2,500 of your state income tax liability to a student scholarship organization like GOAL and let them give scholarships for kids to go to private schools. And you can see tremendous support, and that transcends political party. About 70% of independents, Republicans, and Democrats all support the tax credit scholarship program in Georgia. Then we asked them, okay, do you think that those scholarships should be open to all, or do you think it should be limited to only people that have low income? And basically, if you look at the crosstabs, pretty much everyone who supports this program thinks it should be open to all, except for people who are opposed to it, they're against, they want to means test it, and people who are undecided are about 2 to 1 want to means test it. But pretty much if you support tax credit scholarships, you think it should be open to everybody. And again, that transcends party. Even Democrats, 2 to 1, think it should not be means tested. In Georgia, you know, I asked this question in 2014. And in January 2014, about 20 days into the year, we hit the $58 million cap of donations. And so we said, okay, 3 weeks into 2014, the $58 million cap was hit. Do you think that cap on donations to student scholarship organizations should be allowed to go to $100 million? You know, and you can see about 62% strongly or somewhat favored increasing that cap. Actually, Democrats were more likely to support increasing the cap than Republicans. Then we asked, an education savings account, often called an ESA, allows parents to take their child out of a public school and receive payment into a government-authorized savings account with restricted but multiple uses. Parents can then use these funds to pay for private school tuition, virtual education programs, private tutoring, or save for future college expenses. In general, do you favor or oppose this kind of savings account system? We asked them an earlier question where we gave a slightly different definition and shorter. It said, have you heard of this? Something like 8% of Georgians had heard of this, right? So most people never heard of it. Then we asked them this question, and 67.8% strongly or somewhat favored education savings accounts. 27% strongly or somewhat opposed, right? Well, you could say that's polling data, right? Well, how do Georgians actually feel? Well, despite the biggest taxpayer-funded misinformation campaign in Georgia history, in 2012, about 59% of Georgians voted yes on the Georgia Charter Schools Amendment to make charter schools a viable alternative. Georgians support school choice. They just do, right? Well, should they? Is it good for students, right? And I'll refer you to the study, the win-win study at the Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice website. And again, these slides will be posted online, right? School choice does appear to be win-win. That is, 11 out of 12 random assignment studies where students either randomly got a school voucher or were randomly denied a voucher. 11 out of those 12 studies find that students who exercise school choice have higher academic achievement than students who are denied that choice. The other study found no impact. The most interesting finding, I think, was from Washington, D.C. Students in Washington, D.C. who applied for a voucher but didn't get one, and these vouchers were about a third of the cost of Washington, D.C. public schools. The students who were denied a voucher, they graduated high school about 70%. The students who actually got a voucher and used it graduated high school at 91%. There was also dramatic differences on actually going to college and succeeding. The voucher kids were much more likely to go to college and much more likely to succeed in college if they were able to get a voucher to allow them to afford a private school. Right? But what about kids left behind in public schools? Aren't they going to be harmed? Well, 22 out of 23 studies find that they're not harmed and they actually benefit from school choice. The most interesting study for me was from Milwaukee. What they found was that when the Milwaukee voucher program started in 1990, only about $2,000 left the public school when the kid went to a private school with a voucher. That study found there was no competitive benefits for kids in public school. But when the voucher was increased to $5,000 and the public schools lost even more money and even more kids were able to exercise choice, that's when the public schools improved. Competition works, right? If you're going to lose your money, you're going to get your P's and Q's in a row, right? But if you look at all the research, the biggest benefits of school choice really don't seem to be on test scores. They seem to be on getting kids to finish high school and getting them to go to college and succeed in college. Right? The other big benefits of school choice are a study I did with Jim Kelly of the Gold Scholarship Program. We surveyed Gold Scholarship recipients. They were getting tax credit scholarships in Georgia. And we asked them, why did you leave your public schools? Why did you want to go to a private school? And the answers were fascinating, and you see that at edchoice.org/more-than-scores. And what they said was it was a really improvement in safety for their kids, that they got a better values-based education, and their kids were more likely to finish high school and go to college. That's why they wanted a private school, right? No study shows that kids are harmed by school choice, not one. For every professor like Eric Warren or me that supports school choice, there's about 40 on the other side. 40. They can't gin up one study that shows that kids are harmed by school choice, right? Does school choice harm state or local budgets? I'll show you in a second, no, if you just put a little bit of care in the bill design, right? It's very straightforward to design a school choice bill that saves the state money. Make the state funds that go into a voucher or a tax credit scholarship or an ESA less than the average spending per student of state funds. And if you think some kids that would have gone to private school anyway, you can make a little adjustment for that. But I just want to tell the state legislators, because they know this very well. The public school lobby is very good about taking state money out of special needs vouchers, and they'll do the same thing to an ESA. So I guarantee you that the bill that's going to pop out, not all state funds will be allowed to follow the kid to the school of their choice, because they're going to say take out equalization funding or take out QBE funding below the line, because school funding is very complicated, and they know how to manipulate this very well. Right? So this is very straightforward, right? But it is more complicated about how does school choice affect the budgets of local school districts. And I give this talk in lots of states, including Nevada, right? And it's the same school superintendent, public school superintendent in every state. He just has a different accent. And in Georgia, here's what he sounds like. He said, when that kid leaves with that voucher, right? Well, number one, he'll be lucky if it's just one kid, right? And he says, when that kid leaves with that voucher, still got to pay that light bill, still got to pay that teacher, still got to pay that bus driver. And it's never a woman, because women have too much integrity, and you know I'm telling the truth, right? It's always a dude, right? And that's what he says. And in Nevada, he had the Nevada accent, right? And so basically he's arguing when he loses students, he can't lose any funds because all his costs are fixed, right? Well, really, that's an open question. And so what I tried to do in this study I did for the Friedman Foundation was I said, okay, let's look at what are the fixed and variable costs of running a public school. And I concluded that school choice programs that allow school districts to retain funding for any fixed costs, they don't harm the fiscal budget of a local school district, and they actually can leave more resources for the students who are left behind in public school, all right? So you learn this in Accounting 1 or Economics 1, right? All costs are either fixed or variable. So you got total spending per student, some costs are fixed, some are variable, all right? All states report spending data in these buckets to the federal government, right? Capital, instruction, student support, administration, et cetera. So my job is to figure out which of these spending categories were fixed costs, which ones were variable costs, right? So what I asked was, is it feasible for a school district to cut those cost categories commensurate or more than commensurate with their decrease in students? Is it feasible? Not do they want to, not do they say they can, but is it feasible? So at the time I did the study, I found 4 school districts in Georgia that were losing students for non-school choice reasons, right? One of them was Atlanta, Doherty, Hancock, and then another rural one, right? And so what I found was that those counties, they could reduce the stuff in the red, instruction, student support, instruction staff support, enterprise food. They were able to reduce those cost categories more than commensurate with their decrease in students. So if they lost 6% of their students, they were able to cut those cost categories by more than that from one year to the next. So they demonstrated these are truly variable costs. Things like capital interest administration, they did not cut those as large, or in some cases they even increased them when they lost students. So what I argued in the paper was that money that follows the child that's less than those red categories improves the finances of school districts, leaves more resources for kids left behind, even in the very short run. In the long run, we learned this in Accounting 1, all costs are variable, because you can make new strategic decisions. So I did the report a few years ago. In fiscal year 2009, Georgia Public Schools spent about $11,500 per student. If you want to look at those red cost categories, that was about $7,500 per kid, or about 2/3 of the total. The other about $4,000 are short-run fixed costs that you could let districts retain when they lose students via school choice. Again, in the long run, all costs are variable. If we had a Nevada-style ESA bill, 2-3 years down the road, you could let all the funds go because public schools could make new strategic decisions about school locations and bus routes and things, all right? All right. But keep in mind, I'm not advocating that when you lose customers, you get to keep money, right? By letting school districts retain funds for students they no longer serve, you're letting school districts retain funds for students they no longer serve. Is that how it works in your business, right? Like if I shop at Kroger every week, and then you know what, I decide that Walmart's a better deal and I switch to Walmart, does Kroger get to keep some of my money? Is that how that works? Doesn't work like that in higher ed. If one of my students says, you know what, Scafidi, you're a terrible teacher, I'm going to leave Kennesaw, and I'm going to go to Georgia Gwinnett and get a better education with Eric Warren, all the money goes to Georgia Gwinnett. The state formula money goes, Pell Grants go, Hope Scholarship goes, tuition and fees go, all of it. That's how it works in pre-K too. Only in K-12 education do they get to retain funds when they lose students, right? Now back to that, let me get back to that. Back to that superintendent that argued all his costs are fixed. So here's what he's doing. When he's in the education committee with Senator Millar, or he's in the Ways and Means committee about tax credit scholarships, what he's saying is, all my costs are fixed. When I lose a student with a voucher, you can't cut my funding. But then what is he doing 2 doors down? 2 doors down, he's in the K-12 appropriations subcommittee. And what is he saying there? He's saying, I'm getting more students, and I got to hire more teachers and more bus drivers, and I got to, expand my school. He's arguing all his costs are variable. Which is it? It's the same dude, right? In this committee, all his costs are fixed, but in this committee, all his costs are variable. Which is it? If all his costs are fixed, this is easy. You don't have to fund enrollment growth every year in the midterm adjustment, right? Hundreds of millions, right? Tons of money. This is simple, right? Or if all his costs are variable, then he has no argument. Which is it? Don't let him have it both ways, all right? Another thing I want to say is if you're at the state capitol and someone talks about QBE, the funding formula, they say QBE is broke, right? And you just kind of nod, right? They never funded it. No. I wish I could go back to 1985, but I can't. So I'm missing the big first increase of QBE. So you can see since 1987, Georgia's had a 55% increase in public school students, a 90% increase in FTE staff, 89% increase in teachers, 108% increase in administrators and all other staff. I would hate to see what this would look like if we fully funded it, right? Oh, thanks.
We have legal
Yeah.
recording.
And a lot of the people in all other staff category are people I treated as fixed cost in my analysis. But you can see they're not only fixed, they're super variable, right? They go up at a faster rate than students, right? Are there opportunities for increased school choice in Georgia? Absolutely. We could provide equitable funding for charter schools to help make them more viable and more accessible. We can ensure that every child has access to diverse high school options. Lieutenant Governor Cagle walked in a minute ago. He's been the champion of this, of career academies and dual enrollment. We can make sure that becomes more and more available, and I applaud him for that. We can make sure that you can get college coursework through dual enrollment if that's not available through virtual means, right? On my third bullet there, I'm not paraphrasing Bernie Sanders. I'm paraphrasing John McCain from '08. Just raise the dang cap on the tax credit scholarship program. And last one, and I'll leave it to Senator Hammond to talk about, education savings accounts are a route that's viable for Georgia. Thank you for your time.